Hello there everyone, welcome to Nightmare Narratives. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Marcus Whitehorse, and I've been a park ranger at Mount Rainier for 12 years. I tell you this because what I'm about to share sounds impossible, and you need to know I'm not some crazy person making things up. I've led successful mountain rescues. I know every trail marker within 50 miles. I've pulled people off cliffs, found lost hikers in blizzards, and talked jumpers down from bridges. This job is my life, but none of that prepared me for what happened in October 1967. It started with static on the radio at 2:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was staring at my watch, trying to stay awake during night duty. The voice that came through was Gary Peterson from base camp. "Marcus, we got a problem. 3 climbers missed their check-in from Tell Me Peak. They were supposed to radio in at midnight." I sat up straighter. Missing a check-in wasn't unusual, but something in Gary's voice made my stomach tighten. "Who are we talking about?" "Dr. Elizabeth Hayes from the university. She's up there doing geology work. And the Morrison twins, Rick and Dale. You know them, right?" I did know them. The Morrison brothers had been climbing these mountains since they were teenagers. They knew the peaks better than most rangers. If they were in trouble, it was serious trouble. "Weather up there?" I asked, already reaching for my jacket. "That's the weird thing. It's 70 degrees at 5,000 feet, middle of October, and it feels like summer. Something's not right about it." He was right about that. October in the Cascades should be cold and wet. This heat wave had been going on for a week, and it felt wrong. The animals knew it too. I'd noticed how quiet the forest had been lately. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just silence. "I'll head up at first light," I said. "Standard 24-hour protocol." "Marcus," Gary's voice crackled through the static, "be careful up there." I got a bad feeling about this one. I should have listened to that feeling. By dawn, I was hiking the trail to Tell Me Peak. The morning air was thick and still, like the mountain was holding its breath. My boots crunched on dry leaves that should have been covered in frost. Sweat ran down my back even though I wasn't walking fast. The trail winds through old-growth forest before opening into alpine meadows. I'd walked it hundreds of times, but today something felt different. Wrong. The trees seemed to lean in closer. The shadows stretched longer than they should. My grandmother used to tell stories about these mountains. She was Yakima, and her people considered these peaks sacred. "The forest has guardians," she'd say, "spirits that watch over the old places." I'd always thought they were just stories, beautiful myths, to explain things people didn't understand. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The trail to the climbers' base camp took 3 hours. I found their campsite just after 9 a.m. and immediately knew this wasn't a normal rescue. The tent was still standing, but something was off. The stakes had been pulled from the ground and arranged in a perfect spiral pattern, not torn out like wind would do, placed like someone had carefully removed each one and set it down just so. Inside the tent, their sleeping bags were laid out neat and tidy. No signs of struggle, no blood, but their expensive climbing gear. Thousands of dollars worth of ropes, pitons, and hardware was scattered exactly 30 feet from the camp in what looked like a ritual pattern, not thrown, arranged. That's when I found the first footprint. It was pressed deep into the soft earth near their water source. 18 inches long, 8 inches wide, with 5 distinct toe marks. The big toe had what looked like an opposable thumb. I'd never seen anything like it. I measured it 3 times to be sure. Bear tracks don't look like that. Human feet don't get that big, and the depth of the impression meant whatever made it weighed at least 400 pounds. I radioed for backup and started following the trail. The footprints led straight toward the old burial grounds. Every ranger knew about that section of the park, a cluster of ancient burial mounds that the Yakima tribe had asked us to keep off limits. We respected that. Some places deserved to be left alone. But as I got closer to the restricted area, my equipment started acting strange. The radio filled with static. My compass needle spun like it was drunk, and the temperature dropped 15 degrees in the space of 50 yards. I could see my breath, even though it was still hot everywhere else. Jake Running Bear met me at the trailhead an hour later. Jake was my usual partner for difficult rescues, half Yakima like me, but he knew the old ways better than I did. The moment he stepped out of his truck, his face went pale. "You feel that?" he asked. "Feel what?" "Something heavy in the air, like a storm coming, but worse." He looked toward the burial grounds and shook his head. "My grandfather told me never to go up there alone." "We're not alone," I said. "We're together." That might not be enough. We followed the trail deeper into the restricted zone. The silence was complete now. No wind in the trees, no insects buzzing. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, like the forest was swallowing sound. That's when we found Dr. Hayes. She was sitting, upright against a massive cedar tree, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were closed, and she looked peaceful, like she'd just decided to take a nap in the woods. But she was dead. Jake knelt beside her and checked for a pulse, even though we both knew it was too late. "No wounds," he said. "No signs of violence. She just looks like she's sleeping." "Heart attack," I suggested. "Maybe," but Jake's voice said he didn't believe it. He pointed to her hands. "Look at this." Her fingers were wrapped around sprigs of cedar, arranged in a pattern I didn't recognize. Jake did, though. His face went even paler. "That's how my people prepare bodies for burial," he whispered. "Someone arranged her like this after she died. The Morrison brothers. Would they know traditional Yakima burial customs?" The answer was no, which left us with a very uncomfortable question. Who had arranged Dr. Hayes' body, and where were the Morrison twins? My watch stopped at 3:33 p.m., just froze, second hand and all. I tapped the face, shook my wrist, but nothing happened. Then I walked 20 feet back down the trail, and it started ticking again. "Jake, we need to call this in. Get the coroner up here. Get a full team." That's when I heard the voice. It spoke in Yakima words I hadn't heard since my grandmother died. But somehow I understood every syllable. "Oathbreaker, turn back from sacred ground." Jake grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. "You heard that too?" I nodded. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere, like the trees themselves were speaking. "We should go," Jake said, "right now." But we couldn't leave Dr. Hayes, and we still hadn't found the Morrison brothers. I was about to say so when Jake pointed through the trees. That 400 yards away, something was watching us from the tree line. Through Jake's binoculars, I could see it clearly. Bipedal, massive, covered in gray-brown fur. It stood perfectly still for maybe 30 seconds, then melted back into the forest like smoke. "What the hell was that?" I asked. Jake lowered the binoculars. His hands were shaking. "My grandfather had a name for it. Forest Father, guardian of the burial grounds." "Come on, Jake. You don't really believe that's when we found Rick Morrison." He was hanging 15 feet up in a Douglas fir, suspended by nothing we could see. His body was completely drained of blood, white as paper, but there were no wounds, no puncture marks, no cuts, just a dead man hanging in a tree like a gruesome ornament, and burned into the bark where something had gripped the trunk were handprints, human-shaped but massive, seared into the wood like they'd been red-hot. The backup team arrived just as the sun started setting, for more rangers, including Jimmy Morrison. No relation to the dead climbers, just an unfortunate coincidence. They took one look at Rick's body and started talking about bears and mountain lions, animals that might drag a body up a tree. But animals don't arrange camping gear in ritual patterns. Animals don't fold dead women's hands around cedar sprigs. And animals definitely don't leave burning handprints in tree bark. As darkness fell, a fog bank rolled in from nowhere. The sky had been clear all day, but suddenly we were surrounded by thick, grey mist. It followed us as we moved, always keeping the same distance, always watching. We made camp a quarter mile from the burial grounds. Dale Morrison was still missing, and we'd found a trail of blood drops leading deeper into the restricted area. Fresh blood, which meant he might still be alive. Jimmy Morrison volunteered to take first watch. The rest of us tried to sleep, but every few minutes we'd hear footsteps circling our camp. Slow, heavy footsteps that shook the ground. When we shine our flashlights toward the sound, nothing was there, just darkness, and the feeling that something very large was watching us with ancient, angry eyes. At 2:22 a.m., the ground started shaking. Not like an earthquake. This was rhythmic, like massive footsteps. The ancient trees swayed without any wind, their branches scraping together with sounds like screams. The temperature plummeted to freezing in seconds, and our breath came out in white puffs. Jimmy Morrison was on watch duty when it started. He came running back to camp, his face white with terror. "It's out there," he whispered. "Jesus Christ, it's really out there." "What's out there?" I asked, but I already knew. We all knew. The mist began to swirl and thicken, forming shapes in the darkness. And from that mist, something emerged, 9 feet tall, covered in silver-grey fur that seemed to shimmer in our flashlight beams. Its eyes glowed amber in the darkness, and when they locked onto mine, I felt a shock of recognition run through my body. This thing knew me, knew my bloodline, knew my grandmother's stories. It spoke without moving its mouth, the words appearing directly in my mind. "Your blood knows the old ways, but you serve the destroyers of sacred places." The other rangers were backing away, hands on their weapons, but I couldn't move. Those amber eyes held me frozen, and images flashed through my mind. Dr. Hayes and her team digging in the burial grounds, taking samples, disturbing bones that had rested undisturbed for 200 years. The woman and her companions violated the sleeping places of my people. The voice continued in my head. They took what was not theirs to take. Lightning cracked across the clear sky. Rain began falling in a perfect circle around the creature, leaving us dry just 20 feet away. Ice formed on the ground where it stood, spreading outward like fingers. "Where's Dale Morrison?" I managed to ask. The creature turned its massive head toward the burial grounds. "Come, see the price of desecration." It began walking, not looking back to see if we followed. We did, because what choice did we have? Our equipment had stopped working. Our radios were dead. Our vehicles wouldn't start. We were alone on the mountain with something that could control the weather and speak directly into our minds. The creature led us to the center of the burial grounds where the oldest mounds stood. Dale Morrison was there, sitting upright between 2 ancient graves, alive, but his hair had turned completely white. His eyes stared at nothing, and when we called his name, he didn't respond. "This one did not touch the sacred bones," the creature said, "so I have spared his life. But his mind has seen truths that mortal thoughts cannot hold." Jake Running Bear stepped forward, hands raised peacefully. "Honored Guardian, we understand. We'll make this right. We'll return what was taken." The creature's amber eyes fixed on him. Will you file reports with false words and bring more diggers to disturb more graves?" It was right, and we all knew it. That's exactly what would happen. The Park Service would investigate, bring in experts, treat the burial grounds like a crime scene instead of a sacred place. "What do you want from us?" I asked. The creature turned to me, and suddenly I wasn't seeing the campsite anymore. I was seeing the burial grounds as they once were. A peaceful place where families came to honor their dead. Children learning the old stories. Elders sharing wisdom across generations. Then I saw the present. Dr. Hayes and her team with their shovels and sample containers, treating ancient graves like geology specimens, disturbing remains, photographing sacred objects, planning to take bones back to a university laboratory. "Choose," the creature said. "Honor the old agreements, or join those who violated them." It gestured toward a grove of cedar trees, and I saw them, Dr. Hayes and Rick Morrison, standing among the trees like sentries. Their eyes glowed with the same amber light as the creature's. They were still dead, but they were also still here, eternal guardians of the place they had violated. "We'll return everything," I said quickly. "All the samples, all the photographs. We'll seal this area permanently." "Promises," the creature said, and its voice carried centuries of broken treaties, forgotten agreements, betrayed trust. "Your people's promises are like morning mist." It began to fade, becoming transparent, like the fog around us. But before it disappeared completely, it spoke one final warning: remove the disturbed remains to proper resting, return what was stolen, close this place to your kind forever. Or when the moon is dark again, I will come for you all. The creature vanished, taking the supernatural cold with it. Our equipment started working again. Dale Morrison blinked and looked around like he was waking from a dream. But when he tried to speak, only meaningless sounds came out. We carried him back to camp, but none of us slept. Every shadow looked like watching eyes. Every sound might be footsteps, and in the distance, we could hear something moving through the forest. Something very large, keeping pace with us as we retreated. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. We broke camp as soon as there was light to see by, and carried Dale Morrison down the mountain on a stretcher. He was conscious but couldn't speak coherently, just fragments of words. Guardian, eyes never closed, ... sacred bones ... At the hospital, the doctors said Dale was in shock but physically unharmed. Dr. Hayes's autopsy showed death by cardiac arrest, but her heart was perfectly healthy. No explanation for why it had stopped. Rick Morrison's body was even more puzzling, completely drained of blood with no wounds, no way for the blood to have left his system. I filed my official report the next morning. Environmental exposure and animal predation. The standard explanation for mountain deaths that didn't make sense. The burial grounds were quietly declared off-limits due to geological instability. New warning signs went up. The area was removed from hiking maps, but I couldn't let it go. Over the next 3 days, I made phone calls, found out Dr. Hayes had been working on a mineral survey for a mining company. She'd taken core samples from 6 different locations in the burial grounds, plus artifacts she'd found while digging. Everything was sitting in her university lab, waiting to be analyzed. Jake Running Bear helped me return it all. We drove to the university at night, loaded Hayes's samples and artifacts into Jake's truck, and brought them back to the mountain. We reburied everything exactly where it had been taken from, following traditional Yakima protocols that Jake's grandfather had taught him. Dale Morrison died 3 days later in the psychiatric ward. The doctors said his heart just stopped, same as Dr. Hayes, but the nurse who was with him said his final words were clear. Guardian's eyes never close. I requested a transfer to a different district, told my supervisor I needed a change of scenery. What I really needed was to get away from those mountains before the next new moon. But before I left, I went to see Jake's grandfather. I needed to understand what we'd encountered up there, what my grandmother's stories had really been trying to tell me. The old man listened to my account without interruption. When I finished, he nodded like he'd been expecting this conversation for years. The Forest Father has walked those mountains since before your people came, he said. He is not evil, he is duty. He protects what is sacred because someone must. Why did he let us live? Because you honored the old agreements. You returned what was taken. You closed the violated ground. The old man's eyes grew distant. But he will remember your faces. If your people come again with shovels and disrespect, he will remember. I left Mount Rainier National Park 2 weeks later, took a job in Olympic National Forest, far from the Cascades. But I kept in touch with Jake, and he kept in touch with the seismic monitoring station. The equipment still detects unexplained movement in the restricted area during new moon phases. Rhythmic disturbances that match no known geological activity. The pattern suggests something very large, walking regular patrols through the burial grounds. Something that never sleeps, never leaves, never forgets. That was 57 years ago. I'm retired now, living in a cabin near the coast, where the trees don't whisper and the shadows don't watch. But I still think about that October in 1967 every time the moon goes dark. The burial grounds remain off. The Park Service maintains the geological instability designation, and hikers are turned away by rangers who don't know the real reason the area is closed. Better that way. Some truths are too dangerous to share, but sometimes I get calls from young rangers who've heard strange sounds on night patrol, equipment that stops working near certain sections of the park, wildlife that won't enter specific areas, hikers who report feeling watched by invisible eyes. I tell them what I tell you: respect the old places. Some things are older than our understanding, and some guardians never rest. The Forest Father is still up there, still walking his ancient boundaries, still protecting what remains sacred in a world that's forgotten the meaning of the word. And if you're ever hiking in the Cascades and you come across an area that feels wrong, too quiet, too cold, too watched, turn around. Walk away. Don't ask questions. Don't take pictures. Don't disturb anything, because the guardian of the sacred places doesn't give third chances, and his amber eyes never close. My name is Daniel Ashworth, and I've been a ranger at Yellowstone for 14 years. Before that, I taught geology at the University of Wyoming until budget cuts killed my job. Some days I still wake up angry about it losing tenure, watching younger professors keep their positions while I got the boot. But working in the park isn't all bad. The pay is decent, and I get to use my rock knowledge more than most rangers. September in Yellowstone is my favorite time. The tourists thin, out, the air gets crisp, and the mountains show off their colors. I was doing my morning rounds in Lamar Valley when the radio crackled to life. "Danny, we got a problem at the dig site," said Sarah from dispatch. "Professor Reynolds and her team missed their check-in. Equipment's still running, but nobody's answering." I knew Patricia Reynolds from my teaching days. She was one of the good ones, serious about her work, careful with her students. Her team had been working a Pleistocene site for 3 weeks, digging up dire wolf bones and giant ground sloth fossils. 12,000-year-old stuff that made my geology heart happy. "I'll head over," I radioed back, probably just lost track of time. The drive to the dig site took 20 minutes on the dirt road. The whole area had this weird quiet to it. No birds singing, no insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed muted. I'd been in these mountains long enough to know when something felt off. The excavation was in a small valley surrounded by pine trees. The university had set up their camp, neat and tidy white tents, equipment tables, generators humming. Everything looked normal except for one thing: no people. I parked and walked through the camp. Coffee was still warm in the pot. Notebooks lay open on tables. Pens still in hand positions. It looked like everyone had just vanished mid-sentence. "Hello," I called out. "Professor Reynolds." Nothing. I walked to the dig site itself, a rectangular pit, about 20 feet long and 10 feet wide. The wooden platforms and ropes were still in place, but something was wrong with the excavation. The neat walls had collapsed inward, and expensive equipment was buried under what looked like a perfectly placed rock slide. That's when I noticed. The bones, the fossils they'd been carefully excavating, were arranged in a pattern around the collapsed pit, not scattered randomly like they should be after a cave-in, arranged, like someone had placed them with purpose. My geology training kicked in. Rock slides don't happen this precisely, and they certainly don't arrange ancient bones in neat circles. I grabbed my radio. "Sarah, I need a search team out here. Something's not right." While waiting for backup, I started taking pictures. The bone arrangement looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. Native American maybe. The Shoshone had used this area for centuries, and I'd heard stories about burial grounds in the valley. That's when I heard it, a sound like humming, but too low to really hear. More like feeling it in your chest. It seemed to come from the collapsed pit itself. I knelt down and put my ear to the ground. The humming was definitely there, rhythmic like a heartbeat, but that was impossible. Rocks don't make sounds like that. Standing up, I noticed something else. My breath was visible in the air around the dig site, even though it was 80 degrees outside. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees, in a perfect circle around the excavation. By the time the search team arrived, I'd found one member of the research team. Jenny Morrison, a graduate student, was sitting in the portable toilet with the door wide open. She was alive but completely unresponsive, staring straight ahead with pure white hair that had been brown 3 weeks ago. She clutched a fossilized direwolf claw in her hand so tight we had to pry her fingers open. The weird part, her watch showed that 72 hours had passed, but she'd only been missing for 6 hours according to our records. The search team found no trace of the other 5 researchers. It was like they'd walked into thin air. We combed every inch of the surrounding forest, used dogs, even brought in a helicopter. Nothing. I stayed at the site after the others left, something pulling me back to those arranged bones. In my 14 years as a ranger, I'd seen plenty of weird things. Tourists who swore they saw Bigfoot, campers who claimed UFO sightings, fishermen with tall tales about the Bear Lake monster. I'd always figured it was just people wanting to believe in something bigger than their ordinary lives. But this was different. This was real, and it was happening in my valley. As the sun set, I set up my tent near the dig site. Sarah had argued against it, but I convinced her someone should keep watch. Really, I just couldn't leave. Something about the place had gotten its hooks in me. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of scraping. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the collapsed excavation. The bones had moved, not just shifted, completely rearranged into a different pattern. My heart hammered as I approached the pit. The fossils were now arranged in what looked like a human form. Arms, legs, torso, skull, all made from 12,000-year-old bones that should have been buried under tons of rock. The humming was louder now, and I could feel vibrations through my boots. The ground around the pit was warm, like something large was breathing underneath. I reached for my radio, but it was dead. just static. My cell phone showed no signal. That's when I saw the claw marks. Fresh scratches covered the excavated bones, deep gouges that looked recent. But the claws that made them were huge, bigger than any bear or mountain lion. The marks were still warm to the touch. I backed away from the pit, flashlight beam dancing across the darkness. Something was moving in the trees at the edge of camp. Something big. The movement stopped when my light hit it, but I caught a glimpse of pale bone gleaming in the darkness. Not white like fresh bone, but old and yellowed like the fossils in the pit. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. The only answer was a low rumbling sound that seemed to come from underground. The humming grew louder, and I felt something brush against my mind, not a physical touch, but like someone was trying to look inside my head. Images flashed through my thoughts. The valley, as it was 12,000 years ago, filled with massive creatures, dire wolves hunting in packs, ground sloths the size of elephants, and something else watching from the shadows, something made of old bones and older memories. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the fire pit. The images stopped, but the presence remained. Something was definitely watching me from the darkness. I spent the rest of the night in my tent, with a hunting knife in my hand, listening to the sounds of heavy footsteps circling the camp. When morning came, I found massive tracks in the dirt around my tent. They looked like bear prints, but each one was nearly 3 feet long. The next day, we found Dr. Patricia Reynolds. She was sitting on a rock outcropping about a mile from the dig site, perfectly still. At first, I thought she was just staring at the sunrise. Then I got closer. She had turned to stone. Not a statue or carving, actually turned to stone. Her clothes, her hair, even the expression of terror on her face. All limestone, like she'd been a fossil for millions of years, instead of a living person just days ago. The medical examiner couldn't explain it. The geologist couldn't explain it. Even the FBI agents who showed up couldn't explain how human tissue could transform into limestone in a matter of hours. But I was starting to understand. Something in this valley didn't want to be disturbed. Something that had been sleeping for 12,000 years and didn't appreciate being woken up. The university tried to shut down the dig site, but I convinced them to let me stay as security. I told them I was the only one who knew the area well enough to keep people away. Really, I just couldn't leave. Whatever was happening here was connected to my field, my expertise. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing real science again. Over the next week, I experienced what I can only call time slips. One moment I'd be walking through the modern campsite, and the next I'd be standing in a prehistoric landscape. The valley would be filled with massive creatures, dire wolves, cave bears, ground sloths, the size of small buildings, and always, watching from the shadows, something that wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite human. During these episodes, I could feel the presence more clearly. It wasn't malicious exactly, but it was incredibly old and very, very protective. It had been guarding this place for millennia, and it didn't appreciate strangers digging up its charges. On the 7th night, I met the Bone Valley Guardian face to face. I was sleeping in my tent when something woke me. Not a sound this time, but a feeling like someone was standing right outside. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent flap. It was waiting for me. The creature stood 12 feet tall, assembled from bones I recognized from the dig site. A massive dire wolf skull served as its head, supported by a cave bear's torso and ground sloth limbs. But it wasn't just a collection of old bones. It moved with purpose, with intelligence. Glowing marrow held the skeleton together, pulsing with a light that reminded me of moonlight on water. "You keep coming back," it said, and its voice was like rocks grinding together. Why? I should have run. Any sane person would have run. But I was a scientist, and this was the discovery of a lifetime. "This is my job," I managed to say. "I'm supposed to protect this place." The Guardian tilted its massive skull. "Protect? You let them dig. You let them disturb the sleep of the ancients." I didn't know. The small female knew. The creature gestured toward the forest. She saw what they were doing. She tried to stop them. I followed its gaze and saw Jenny Morrison standing among the trees, still alive, but changed. Her white hair gleamed in the moonlight, and her eyes held the same ancient intelligence I saw in the Guardian's. Empty sockets. She chose to stay, the Guardian continued. To help me guard this place. The others chose differently. What happened to them? The Guardian moved closer, and I felt the temperature drop another 20 degrees. "Come, I will show you." I followed. It through the forest, every rational part of my brain screaming at me to run, but the scientist in me couldn't resist. This was bigger than any discovery I'd ever imagined. We walked for what felt like hours, though my watch showed only minutes passing. The Guardian led me to a clearing I'd never seen before, despite years of hiking these mountains. There they were, all 5 missing researchers, arranged like a museum display. Each one had been turned to stone, but their positions told a story. They'd been trying to load fossils into wooden crates, stealing them, not studying them. They violated the sacred trust, the Guardian said. They took what was not theirs to take. I knelt beside one of the crates. Inside were the most beautiful fossils I'd ever seen, complete skeletons, perfectly preserved specimens that would have been worth millions to private collectors. They were going to sell them, I whispered. The earth remembers everything, the Guardian said. Every creature that has died here, every bone that has been buried, every violation of the sacred places. I am the keeper of those memories. The creature reached out with one massive claw and touched my forehead. Suddenly, I could feel it's a vast network of bones and fossils stretching beneath the entire valley. Thousands of years of death and burial, all connected by underground mineral streams. The Guardian wasn't just one creature, it was the consciousness of every animal that had ever died in this place. Your people disturbed the arrangements, it said. The bones must be returned to their proper positions, or you will join my permanent collection. I spent the next 3 days learning the truth about Lamar Valley. With Jenny's help she could still speak, though her voice sounded like wind through stone. I began to understand what the research team had really been doing. Dr. Reynolds had discovered something incredible in the dig site. Not just ordinary Pleistocene fossils, but specimens so perfect and complete they would have revolutionized paleontology. Instead of reporting the find to the university, she'd made a deal with private collectors. The plan was to smuggle the fossils out piece by piece, claiming they were common specimens not worth cataloguing. But the Guardian had been watching. It had tried to warn them by rearranging the bones, by creating cold spots and strange sounds. When they ignored the warnings and continued digging, it had acted to protect its charges. The old ways are better, Jenny told me as we worked to return the stolen fossils to their original positions. The Shoshone knew not to disturb this place. They understood that some things should stay buried. We worked by moonlight, the Guardian watching over us like a massive prehistoric security guard. Every bone had to be placed exactly where it belonged, following patterns that stretched back thousands of years. The creature could sense when something was wrong, guiding us to the correct positions. On the 4th night, as we placed the last of the stolen fossils, an old Shoshone man appeared at the edge of the clearing. He walked straight to the Guardian, as if giant bone creatures were perfectly normal. "You have done well, Daniel Ashworth," he said to me, "but the disturbance runs deeper than you know." He gestured to the excavation site, and I saw what he meant. The university dig had been small, but it had broken something larger. Cracks spread out from the pit like a spiderweb, and through those cracks I could see the vast bone network beneath the valley. "The Earth's memory has been fractured," the old man continued. "It will take time to heal. Until then, this place must be sealed." The Guardian nodded and began to move. It walked to the excavation site and raised its massive arms. The ground shook, and I heard the sound of rocks grinding together. The creature was causing a controlled landslide, filling in the dig site and sealing the underground network. "Wait," I called out. The research value, the scientific importance. The Guardian turned its ancient skull toward me. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue. Some discoveries are meant to stay buried." The rock slide lasted for hours. When it was over, the excavation site was completely filled in, covered by tons of stone and earth. The Guardian had sealed the underground network, but the effort had cost it. The creature was smaller now, made of fewer bones, its glow dimmer. "Will you return?" I asked. "I am always here," it replied. "In every bone, in every fossil, in every creature that has died in this valley. When the earth heals, I will be stronger. Until then, I wait." The Guardian began to sink into the ground, its bones separating and disappearing into the earth. In moments, it was gone, leaving only the faint scent of ancient stone and the memory of glowing marrow. Jenny Morrison remained behind, but she was no longer the frightened graduate student I'd found in the portable toilet. She moved with the same ancient grace as the Guardian, her white hair flowing in wind that touched no one else. "Will you stay?" she asked me. For a moment, I was tempted to become part of something larger, to help guard the secrets of the valley for the next 1,000 years. But I had my own life to live, my own responsibilities. I'll watch over the area, I promised. Make sure no one else disturbs it. She nodded and walked into the forest, disappearing among the trees like moonlight on water. The official report blamed the researchers' deaths on a tragic landslide. The university accepted the explanation, closed the dig site permanently, and designated the area as geologically unstable. The families got closure, the insurance companies paid out, and everyone moved on. Everyone except me. I couldn't go back to my normal ranger duties after what I'd seen. I kept thinking about the Guardian's words, about the Earth's memory, and the importance of proper burial. I put in for a transfer to cemetery maintenance and spent my off hours studying Native American burial practices. The nightmares started about a month later. Not scary dreams, but vivid memories of the vast bone network beneath Yellowstone. I could feel every fossil, every ancient creature, every disturbance to the underground matrix. Sometimes I'd wake up knowing exactly where someone had illegally dug up artifacts, or when construction crews had unknowingly disturbed old burial sites. I started making anonymous calls to the authorities, reporting violations I couldn't possibly have known about. My success rate was perfect, which made some people suspicious, but they could never prove anything. The seismic equipment we'd left in Lamar Valley continued to register strange readings, regular pulses that matched a heartbeat centered on the sealed excavation site. The official explanation was underground water movement, but I knew better. The Guardian was still down there, still healing, still protecting its charges. 6 months after the incident, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a small piece of fossilized bone and a note written in Jenny Morrison's handwriting. The Earth remembers everything. Thank you for helping it remember correctly. I keep the bone fragment on my desk as a reminder. Some discoveries are meant to stay buried. Some knowledge is too dangerous to pursue, and some guardians never sleep. The old Shoshone man's words still echo in my mind. Some bones must sleep undisturbed until the world ends. I believe him, and I'll spend the rest of my life making sure they do. Sometimes, late at night, I drive out to Lamar Valley and sit in my truck, listening. The humming is still there, faint but constant. The Guardian is still protecting its charges, still keeping the Earth's memory intact, and I'm still watching, still guarding the Guardians, because some secrets are worth keeping, even if it means giving up the discovery of a lifetime. My name is Thomas Redfield, and I've seen things in the Minnesota woods that still wake me up screaming 30 years later. I'm telling this story now because I'm getting old, and someone needs to know what really happened out there in January 1978. The official reports called it death by exposure, but that's not the truth, not even close. I was 41 then, working as a ranger in the Superior National Forest. Been doing it for 6 years, ever since I came back from Vietnam and needed somewhere quiet to put my head back together. The woods helped. They were peaceful, predictable, nothing like the jungle, where every shadow might hide death. I'd lost my wife Sarah in a car accident that fall. Ice on Highway 61, they said. 1 minute she's driving home from her sister's house, the next she's wrapped around a pine tree. The empty house got too loud after that, so I volunteered for every winter patrol that came up. The cold and silence suited me fine. That morning started like any other. Coffee black, weather report worse. The radio crackled to life around 7 am base to any unit. We got a situation up near Basswood Lake. Family missed their check-in yesterday. I keyed the radio. Redfield here. What kind of family? The Carlson's dad, mom, 2 kids. Been winter camping up there for years. Know what they're doing. That got my attention. The Carlsons were locals, experienced. Pete Carlson had taught wilderness survival at the community college. If they missed a check-in, something was wrong. I'll take it, I said. Tom, it's 20 below out there, and the weather service is calling for worse. Polar vortex coming down from Canada. I've been in worse, and I had 13 months in the Vietnamese jungle. Taught you things about surviving when the world wants you dead, but that was heat and humidity. This was different. This was cold that could kill you in minutes if you weren't careful. I loaded my pack with extra gear, emergency blankets, flares, first aid kit, enough food for 3 days. My rifle, though I couldn't imagine needing it for a rescue operation. The drive to Basswood took 2 hours on roads that were more ice than asphalt. The wind hit me like a fist when I got out of the truck. It was the kind of cold that made your teeth ache and your breath freeze before it left your mouth. I'd been in Minnesota winters my whole life, but this was something else. This was the kind of cold that made the old-timers talk about the winter of 1888, when entire families froze to death in their beds. I strapped on my snowshoes and headed into the forest. The Carlsons' campsite was supposed to be about 2 miles in, near a small lake where the kids liked to ice fish. The snow was deep, maybe 3 feet, and every step was work. But the woods were beautiful in their way. Quiet, pure white snow, hanging heavy on pine branches. The kind of scene that ends up on Christmas cards. It took me an hour to reach the lake. I could see their campsite from 100 yards away, and I knew immediately something was wrong. The tent was wrong. It was still standing, but damaged, shredded, like something had torn it apart from the inside. I approached slowly, calling out, "Pete, Mary, it's Tom Redfield, Forest Service." No answer, just the wind in the trees and the crunch of snow under my shoes. When I got closer, I could see the sleeping bags scattered around the campsite, frozen solid. A Coleman lantern lay on its side, the glass broken. Their fire pit was cold, probably had been for hours, but no bodies, no people at all. I keyed my radio base. "This is Redfield. I'm at the Carlson campsite. We got a problem here. Static." "Then, what kind of problem, Tom?" I looked around the destroyed camp, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I'm not sure yet, but these folks didn't just pack up and leave. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Even in the bitter cold, there was something wrong in the air, sweet and rotten at the same time, like meat left too long in a warm car. It made my stomach turn. I started examining the campsite more carefully, using my training from the war and 6 years of ranger work. The tent was shredded from the inside out. That was clear. Long tears in the nylon, like someone had taken a knife to it. But the cuts were too clean, too deliberate, and there were stains on the fabric. Dark stains that I was pretty sure were blood. The sleeping bags told a story too. They were scattered in a rough circle around where the tent had been, like people had been dragged out of them in different directions. I found Pete's wallet in one of the bags, with $43 still in it. No robber would leave cash behind. Then I found the first set of tracks. They started normal enough, boot prints in the snow, leading away from the tent. Size 12, probably Pete's hiking boots, but about 20 feet from the campsite. Something strange happened to those tracks. They got longer, wider. The heel marks disappeared, and what looked like claw marks appeared at the front. I knelt down in the snow, studying the prints. In Vietnam, tracking could mean the difference between life and death, so I'd gotten good at reading sign. But these tracks didn't make sense. It was like Pete had changed, like his feet had grown and stretched as he walked. I followed the trail, my rifle ready now. The tracks led in a rough circle around the campsite, sometimes coming close, sometimes moving away, like whatever made them had been pacing, hunting. That's when I heard the voice, "Help me." I spun around, rifle up. It was Mary Carlson's voice, clear as day, but I couldn't see anyone. "Mary, where are you?" "Over here. Please help me." The voice seemed to come from 3 different directions at once. I turned in a circle, scanning the trees. Nothing, just snow and shadows and that wind that cut through your coat like it wasn't there. "Mary, keep talking, I'm coming." But the voice had stopped. The woods were quiet again, except for the wind. I keyed my radio base. "I need backup out here. Something's not right." "What's your situation, Tom? How do you explain that you're hearing voices from someone who's probably dead? That the tracks around a destroyed campsite look like they were made by something that isn't quite human?" "Just send someone," I said, "and tell them to bring extra gear." I kept following the tracks. They led me away from the lake, into the deeper woods where the trees grew closer together and the snow was deeper. The temperature seemed to be dropping too. My thermometer read 25 below, but it felt colder, much colder. That's when I found the first body. Pete Carlson was sitting against a big pine tree about 200 yards from the campsite. At first glance, you might think he was just resting, taking a break from hiking, but when I got closer, I could see the truth. Something had been eating him. His coat was torn open, and there were bite marks on his chest and arms. Big bite marks, too big for any animal I knew. The wounds were frozen solid, which probably saved me from losing my breakfast right there. But what really got to me was his face. Pete was looking back toward the campsite. His eyes were open, staring like he'd been watching something, waiting for something. Even in death, there was terror in those eyes. I checked for a pulse, knowing I wouldn't find one. Pete had been dead for hours, maybe since yesterday evening, but his body was positioned weird, like someone had arranged him, posed him. Base, this is Redfield. My voice was shaky now. I found Pete Carlson. He's dead. Looks like an animal attack. What kind of animal? I looked at the bite marks again. They were too big for a wolf, too systematic for a bear. Bears don't arrange their kills like furniture. I don't know, I said. Something big. The radio crackled. Jake Sullivan's on his way to you. Should be there in an hour. Jake was a good man. Been a ranger longer than me. He'd know what to do. But as I looked around at the trees and shadows, I had a feeling that whatever had killed Pete Carlson wasn't done yet. The wind picked up, and I swear I heard Mary's voice again, calling for help from somewhere deeper in the woods. But this time, I didn't follow it. Jake Sullivan arrived just as the sun was starting to go down. I heard his snowmobile before I saw him, the engine echoing through the trees like thunder. When he pulled up to the campsite, he took one look around and whistled low. Jesus, Tom, what happened here? I wish I knew. Jake was 55, built like a bear. He'd been working these woods since before I got back from the war. If anyone would have answers, it would be him. He looked at Pete's body, examined the tracks, poked around the destroyed tent. The whole time, he kept shaking his head and muttering under his breath. You find the others? He asked. Not yet. But I heard Mary's voice earlier, calling for help. Jake gave me a look. You sure about that? I know what I heard. We set up a perimeter around the campsite as darkness fell. Jake had brought emergency flares, and we placed them in a rough circle to give us some light. The plan was simple. Take shifts through the night, watch for signs of the family, and call for a full search team in the morning. But plans don't always work out. Around 10 p.m., while Jake was examining more tracks, I found Mary. She was about 50 yards from where we'd found Pete, deeper in the woods. Like her husband, she'd been running when she died. You could see it in her posture, the way her body was frozen mid-stride. Her face was locked in an expression of absolute terror. But here's the thing that still gives me nightmares. She was running toward the campsite, not away from it. Whatever she was afraid of, it wasn't behind her. It was ahead of her. It was where we were. Jake, I called. Found her. He came running, took one look, and went pale. We need to get out of here, Tom. What about the kids? The kids are probably dead, and if we don't leave now, we will be too. But before we could move, we heard them. Voices, coming from the darkness beyond our flares. First it was little Katie Carlson, 8 years old, crying for her mummy. Then it was 12-year-old Mark, asking why we wouldn't help him. Jake grabbed my arm. Don't listen to them. But what if, Tom? I found Mark 10 minutes ago. He's dead, frozen solid in a snowbank, about 100 yards that way. The voices kept calling. Katie's got closer, like she was walking toward our light. But we couldn't see anything in the darkness beyond the flares. That's when Jake told me about the old stories. My grandmother was Ojibwe, he said, his voice barely above. A whisper. She used to tell stories about the Wendigo, the hungry dead. Said they walked in the coldest winters, when people were desperate enough to do terrible things. That's just folklore. Jake, is it? Look around. Tom, look at what we're seeing here. He had a point. The bite marks on the body is the tracks that changed from human to something else. The voices calling from the darkness, and the cold. God, the cold was getting worse. My thermometer now read 35 below, but it felt like 50. The metal parts of my rifle were so cold, they burned to touch. Even with my heavy gloves, my fingers were going numb. At 2:15 a.m., Jake went to check the perimeter. I heard him scream once, a sound that cut through the wind like a knife. Then nothing. Jake, I called. Jake, where are you? No answer. I grabbed a flare and went looking for him, but he was gone. Just gone. His snowshoes were still there, but no sign of Jake himself. It was like something had just taken him. And then I heard his voice. Tom, help me. I'm hurt. I'm over here. It was Jake's voice, no question. Same accent, same way of talking. But it was coming from the wrong direction. Coming from the darkness where we'd heard the dead children calling. Jake, Is that really you? Of course, it's me. I fell, hurt my leg, can't move, but something was wrong with the voice. It was too perfect, too much like Jake, if that makes sense. Like someone was trying really hard to sound exactly like him. I didn't go into the darkness. Instead, I radioed for help. Base, this is Redfield. Officer down. I need immediate backup. Static then. Tom, what's your situation? Jake Sullivan is missing, possible injury. And we've got something else. Out here, something that's not ... not normal. There was a long pause. Then, hang tight, Tom, help is coming. But help was hours away. And I was alone in the woods, with something that could take a full-grown man without leaving a trace. Something that could steal voices and use them like bait. I fed more wood to the fire and settled in to wait for dawn. But I knew, deep in my bones, that whatever was out there wasn't going to wait for the sun to come up. It was hunting, and I was next. At first light, I saw it. It stood just beyond the dying flares, maybe 30 yards away. At first glance, you might mistake it for a person. It was shaped like a person, anyway, but it was too tall, maybe 8 feet, and too thin, skinny in a way that looked wrong, like someone had stretched a normal human body until it was ready to snap. Its skin was grey-white, the color of old snow. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in hands with fingers too long and nails too sharp. But the worst part was its face. It was wearing Jake's face, not like a mask, but like it had become. Jake's face, the same grey beard, the same brown eyes, even the same scar on his forehead from where he'd hit a tree branch years ago. But the expression was wrong. Hungry, always hungry. When it spoke, it used Jake's voice. "Hello, Tom." I raised my rifle, but my hands were shaking. From the cold, from fear, from the impossibility of what I was seeing. "You're not Jake." It smiled with Jake's mouth. "I am now." I consumed him. His warmth, his memories, his voice, everything that made him who he was. "What are you?" "I am hunger. I am the cold that kills. I am what happens when people become so desperate, so starving, that they'll eat anything, even each other." The thing that looked like Jake started walking toward me, slow and casual, like we were having a friendly conversation. I was human once, long time ago. Winter of 1932, up in the Boundary Waters. My family and I got snowed in. Supplies ran low. We made ... choices, bad choices. And when the hunger got too strong, when we'd eaten everything else ... It was close enough now that I could see the details of Jake's face, but the eyes were wrong. Empty, like looking into a deep, dark hole. After that, I couldn't die, couldn't stay warm. All I could do was hunt, feed, take from others what I'd lost. I pulled the trigger. The bullet hit its center mass. Should have dropped it instantly. Instead, it just staggered back a step and laughed. "Iron won't stop me, Tom. The cold runs too deep." That's when I remembered something Jake had said earlier, about his grandmother's stories. Fire. The old legends always mentioned fire. I grabbed one of the emergency flares from my pack and struck it. The red light flared up, bright and hot, and the thing that wore Jake's face hissed and stepped back. "Ah," it said. "You know the old ways." I waved the flare at it, and it retreated further, but I only had 3 flares left, and they don't burn forever. "Where are you keeping them?" I demanded. "The children, safe, preserved. The cold keeps them fresh." It pointed toward a cluster of rocks about 50 yards away. I could see an opening between them, the mouth of a cave. "The boy still lives. Barely. You could save him, if you're quick enough." It was baiting me. I knew that. But if there was even a chance that Mark Carlson was still alive, I lit a second flare and started backing toward the cave, keeping the first one pointed at the creature. It followed me, staying just outside the circle of light and heat. The cave was shallow but deep enough to hide body. I found them arranged along the walls like some kind of sick museum. Pete, Mary, little Katie, all frozen solid. And at the back, barely breathing, was Mark. He was alive, but just barely. Hypothermia had set in, and his lips were blue. But his eyes were open, and he recognized me. "Ranger," he whispered. "I'm here, son. I'm going to get you out." I wrapped him in my emergency blanket and lifted him up. He was light, too light. The cold and fear had taken a lot out of him. The creature was waiting at the cave mouth when I came out. "You can't save him," it said with Jake's voice. "He's already mine. The cold has him. Like hell." I had 1 flare left. I lit it and threw it right at the thing's chest. The flame caught on whatever passed for its clothes, and it screamed. Not with Jake's voice this time, but with something older and more terrible. The creature stumbled backward, batting at the flames. I ran. With Mark in my arms, I ran through the snow, toward where I'd left my truck. Behind me, I could hear the thing following, crashing through the trees like a wounded animal. But as I got closer to the road, to warmth and civilization, the sounds of pursuit faded. When I finally looked back, there was nothing there but snow and trees. I made it to the truck, got the heater running, and radioed for an ambulance. Mark survived, though he lost 3 fingers to frostbite and spent weeks in the hospital. That was 45 years ago, and I've never been the same. The official report blamed the deaths on exposure and animal predation. A freak winter storm, they said. Tragic accident. The kind of thing that happens when people underestimate the wilderness. I never told them about the creature. Who would believe me? A Wendigo in the Minnesota woods. They'd have shipped me off to a psychiatric hospital. But I know what I saw, what I fought. Mark Carlson remembers too, though he's never talked about it publicly. Sometimes I see him around town, and we nod at each other like old soldiers who've shared something nobody else could understand. He told me once, years later, that he still sees it sometimes. On the coldest winter nights, he'll look out his bedroom window and see a tall figure standing at the edge of the woods, just watching the house, waiting. I transferred to fire prevention after that winter, spent the rest of my career teaching people about wildfire safety, helping them understand the importance of controlled burns and fire breaks. I carried 12 lighters with me at all times. My wife used to joke about it before she died, said, I was preparing for the apocalypse. Maybe I was. Because the thing is, I don't think I killed it. Fire hurt it, drove it away. But creatures like that, they don't just die, they wait. They hibernate through the warm months and wake up when the cold comes back. Every winter, when the temperature drops below 0 and the wind starts howling through the trees, I remember that morning at Basswood Lake. I remember Jake's face on something that wasn't Jake. I remember the sound it made when it screamed. And sometimes, on the coldest nights, I think I can hear it calling my name from the woods behind my house, using Sarah's voice now, sweet and familiar, asking me to come outside, asking me to come home. But I stay inside. I keep the fires burning, and I wait for spring, because some hungers never die. They just wait for the right kind of cold, the right kind of desperation, to wake up again. The Ojibwe have a saying, the Wendigo's hunger is the hunger that eats hunger itself. It's never satisfied, never full. It just keeps consuming, growing stronger with every life it takes. I'm 78 now, and my time is running short. That's why I'm telling this story, so someone else will know, so someone else will be ready when the temperature drops, and the thing that walks in the coldest nights comes looking for its next meal. Keep your fires burning, stay inside when the wind howls, and if you hear someone calling your name from the darkness, don't answer. No matter how much they sound like someone you love. Asterisk, Thomas Redfield, Superior National Forest Service, retired Duluth, Minnesota, December 2023, asterisk. My name is Rebecca Thornton, and I've been a park ranger for 9 years. When people hear that, they usually picture some guy in a uniform, feeding bears or giving nature talks to school kids. They don't expect a 32-year-old woman who can track a wounded deer for miles or handle drunk campers twice her size. But that's exactly what I am, the first female ranger in this district of Pisgah National Forest, and I've had to prove myself every single day. The call came in at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in August 1983. I was finishing paperwork at the ranger station when dispatch crackled through my radio. Rebecca, we've got multiple 911 calls coming in from the Blue Ridge campground. Campers reporting. Well, they're saying werewolves. I almost laughed. Almost. Come again, dispatch. I know how it sounds, but we've got 3 separate families, all saying the same thing. 7-foot wolfmen walking on 2 legs. They're saying these things can talk. I grabbed my keys and flashlight. In 9 years, I'd seen plenty of weird stuff. People always blamed monsters when they were really dealing with rabid raccoons or confused black bears. Last year, the whole Beast of Bladenborough nonsense turned out to be nothing more than a sick dog pack. This would be the same thing. I'm heading out there now. I said. The drive to Blue Ridge took 20 minutes on winding mountain roads. As I got closer, I could see the glow of emergency lights through the trees. When I pulled into the campground, my stomach dropped. The place looked like a war zone. 3 RVs were completely destroyed, not damaged, destroyed. One was flipped. On its side, another had deep scratches running from the ground to the roof, like something with massive claws had used it as a scratching post. Picnic tables were scattered everywhere, some broken into pieces. Sheriff's Deputy Mike Torres met me at the entrance. His face was pale in the red and blue lights. "Rebecca, I've never seen anything like this," he said. "The families are all saying the same crazy story, but look at this damage. What kind of animal could do this?" I walked over to examine the scratches on the overturned RV. They were deep gouges in the metal, spaced about 4 inches apart, too big for a bear, too organized for random destruction. "Where are the families now?" I asked. "We moved them to the community center in town." But Rebecca... Mike pointed toward the tree line. "Look at those marks." I followed his flashlight beam. 8 feet up on a massive pine tree, more claw marks, deep scratches that formed what almost looked like symbols or territory markers. "Mike, bears don't climb that high to make marks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And they sure don't make patterns like that." As we talked, I became aware of the silence. In all my years patrolling these woods, I'd never heard them this quiet. No insects buzzing, no owls calling, no small animals rustling in the brush. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. "Have you walked the perimeter yet?" I asked. "We were waiting for you. The state boys should be here soon, but they said you know these woods better than anyone." I nodded, but something cold was settling. In my stomach, this wasn't normal animal behavior. Animals don't systematically destroy property. They don't work together to flip RVs, and they definitely don't make territorial marks 8 feet up on trees. As I prepared to investigate further, I heard something that made my blood freeze. From deep in the woods, so faint I almost missed it, came a sound like voices talking, but mixed with the voices were low, rumbling growls. "Mike, did you hear that?" He cocked his head, listening. For a moment, there was nothing. Then it came. Again, definitely voices, but speaking words I couldn't make out. And underneath it all, that animal sound that raised every hair on my arms. "What the hell is that?" Mike whispered. I checked my service weapon and radio. "I don't know, but we're going to find out. And Mike, call for backup. All the backup you can get." As we prepared to enter the woods, I caught a scent on the night air that made me want to gag. It was like wet dog mixed with human sweat. But there was something else underneath. Something that smelled wrong, like meat left in the sun too long. The families had said werewolves. I'd spent my whole career explaining away monster stories with logic and science. But standing there in that destroyed campground, surrounded by impossible claw marks and unnatural silence, I was starting to wonder if some monsters might be real. The next morning brought reinforcements and more questions. 4 additional rangers arrived from other districts, including Billy Matthews, a tracker with 20 years of experience, who could follow a mouse through a thunderstorm. If anyone could make sense of these tracks, it was Billy. We started, at first light, examining the evidence that looked even stranger in daylight. The claw marks weren't random. They formed a clear pattern around the campground, like something had been marking territory. But what really got my attention were the tracks. "Rebecca, come look at this," Billy called from near the overturned RVI. Walked over to where he was crouched, studying the ground with his magnifying glass. "What do you see?" He pointed to a clear print in the soft dirt. "This starts as a paw print, wolf, but way too big. About here," he moved his finger along the track. "It starts changing. Look." I knelt beside him and felt my mouth go dry. The track clearly showed a wolf paw at the heel, but as it progressed forward, it gradually became a human handprint. Not a paw that looked like a hand, an actual human hand with individual finger marks. "Billy, that's impossible." "I know it's impossible, but here it is, and there's more." He led me to another spot. 6 different sets of tracks, all showing the same thing. Paw to hand, like something was changing shape as it walked. We spent the morning documenting everything. The tracks showed the creatures had worked as a team, surrounding the campground in a coordinated attack. They'd specifically targeted the RVS with families. There were 2 single campers and an elderly couple that hadn't been touched. That afternoon, I interviewed the families at the community center. The Hendersons, the Kowalskis, and the Garcias all told the same impossible story. It stood up on two legs like a man, said Tom Henderson, his voice shaking, but it had the head of a wolf, and when it talked, its voice sounded ... educated, like a college professor or something. Maria Garcia nodded frantically. It knew our names, called my daughter Rosa by name, even though we'd never seen it before. How did it know our names? The most disturbing detail came from 8-year-old Rosa Garcia herself. The Wolfman said he wanted to meet the Lady Ranger. He said she was the alpha of the human pack. A chill ran down my spine. Rosa, are you sure it said that? She nodded solemnly. He said they wanted to see if you were worthy. As the sun set, our team prepared for night patrol. We'd divided into 3 groups of 2, each covering a different section of the forest around the campground. Billy and I took the north section, where the tracks seemed heaviest. We'd been walking for about an hour when Billy grabbed my arm. "Do you smell that?" he whispered. The scent hit me like a wall. That same mixture of wet dog, human sweat, and something rotten. But it was much stronger now, so strong it made my eyes water. "They're close," I whispered back, unholstering my weapon. That's when we heard the voices. "The female leads their pack," came a voice from the darkness ahead. It sounded human, but there was something wrong with it, like someone talking with their mouth full of teeth. "She will understand our ways," said another voice, from a different direction. "She knows what it means to be alpha." Billy and I stood back to back, trying to see into the thick woods around us. Our flashlights showed nothing but trees and shadows. "Who's out there?" I called. "This is Park Service. Identify yourselves." Laughter echoed through the trees, definitely human laughter, but mixed with sounds no human throat could make, like wolves trying to laugh. "We know who you are, Rebecca Thornton," the first voice said. My name in that inhuman throat made my skin crawl. "We have been watching you. You lead the humans in our territory." "Billy," I whispered, "call for backup, now." But when I looked over, Billy was gone. I spun in a circle, flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Billy, Billy, where are you?" More laughter from the trees. "Your pack member has joined us for conversation," the voice said. "Do not worry, we are being very ... educational." Then, I heard Billy scream. It wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of someone in unimaginable pain, cut short so suddenly that the silence afterward was worse than the noise. "Billy!" I shouted, running toward where I thought the scream had come from. I found him 20 yards away, at the base of a large oak tree. He was positioned sitting up against the trunk, but his head was tilted at an impossible angle. His throat had been torn open, but there was something else wrong with the scene. He'd been arranged, positioned carefully, almost respectfully. His hands were folded in his lap, his legs straight out in front of him. Someone, or something, had taken the time to pose him. My radio crackled to life, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Rebecca," came Billy's voice through the speaker. "Rebecca, can you hear me?" But Billy was dead at my feet. "Rebecca, this is Billy. Where are you? I think I'm lost." I stared at the radio in horror. The voice was perfect, exactly Billy's. Tone, his accent, even the way he pronounced my name. "We learned quickly," came the inhuman voice from the darkness around me. "Your pack communication methods are simple." I started backing toward the trail, weapon drawn, radio clutched in my other hand. Every shadow could be hiding something. Every sound could be them moving closer. "What do you want?" I called out. "We want to meet our new sister," the voice replied. "You understand leadership. You understand what it means to be strong when others are weak. Tomorrow night, when the moon is full, come to Looking Glass Rock. Come alone. And if I don't..." The laughter came from all around me now, at least 6 different voices, surrounding me completely. "Then we will visit every campground in your territory, every family, every child, until you understand that some invitations cannot be refused." I turned and ran. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Billy's body positioned like some kind of grotesque offering. Every time I started to drift off, I heard his voice coming through the radio. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called the sheriff, the state police, and every ranger station within 50 miles. If these things wanted to meet me at Looking Glass Rock, they were going to get more than they bargained for. "Rebecca, I have to ask," said Sheriff Morrison when he arrived with 6 deputies. "Are you sure about what you saw?" The stress of this job, especially for a woman trying to prove herself. I cut him off. Sheriff Billy Matthews is dead. His body is in the woods, with his throat torn out. That's not stress talking, that's murder. The recovery team found Billy exactly where I'd left him, still positioned against the tree. But when the coroner examined him, he found something that made everyone go quiet. These aren't knife wounds, Dr. Patel said, pointing to Billy's throat. These are bite marks. Canine bite marks, but from something with a jaw span of nearly 8 inches. That's twice the size of the largest wolf. As we prepared for the night patrol, more strange reports came in. Campers at 3 other sites had heard voices in the woods, voices that mimicked their dead relatives, trying to lure them outside. Dogs throughout the county were refusing to go outdoors after dark. The Animal Control Office reported that even caged animals were acting terrified, huddling together and whimpering. We set up a perimeter around Looking Glass Rock with 12 armed men. I wore a wire, and we had sharpshooters positioned on high ground. If something wanted to meet me, we'd be ready. Looking Glass Rock is a massive granite dome that rises nearly 4,000 feet above sea level. During the day, it's a popular spot for rock climbers and hikers. At night, especially during a full moon, it's beautiful but isolated, the perfect place for something that didn't want to be seen. I climbed to the summit just before midnight, every sense on high alert. The full moon made the granite shine like silver, and I could see for miles in every direction. I was completely exposed up there, but that was the point. If they wanted to meet, they'd have to show themselves. "I'm here," I called out to the night. "You wanted to talk. Let's talk." For several minutes, there was nothing. Then I heard footsteps on rock, not the sound of paws, but actual footsteps, human footsteps. 6 figures emerged from the shadows at the edge of the summit. In the moonlight, they looked almost human. At first, almost. They walked upright like men, but they were massive, at least 7 feet tall, with shoulders that belonged on football players. As they got closer, I could see their faces in the moonlight, and my blood turned to ice. They had the heads of wolves, but wrong somehow. The snouts were shorter, more like German shepherds, but the eyes were completely human. Intelligence blazed. In those eyes, not animal cunning, but human thought and reasoning. The largest one, clearly the leader, stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was exactly what I'd heard in the woods. Educated, articulate, but coming from a throat that shouldn't have been able to form human words. "Rebecca Thornton," he said, and hearing my name from that muzzle made me want to run screaming. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. What are you?" I managed to ask. "We are what we have always been," he replied. "Hunters, survivors, the apex predators of these mountains." He gestured to the others. "We were human once, long ago, a hunting party that came to these mountains in 1823, seeking the great elk that lived here then. What happened to you?" The leader's ears flattened against his skull, an oddly canine gesture. "We killed a Cherokee medicine man's son during a hunt. In his grief and rage, he cursed us to become the very beasts we loved to hunt. We have walked these mountains for 160 years, learning, adapting, surviving." I could hear my backup team's voices crackling through my earpiece, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure the creatures could hear it. "We have watched you," the leader continued. "You understand pack hierarchy. You lead the humans who guard our territory. You are strong, intelligent, ruthless when necessary. These are qualities we value. What do you want from me?" "We want you to join us," he said simply, "to become our alpha female, to help us hunt, to help us grow our pack. In return, we offer you power beyond imagination, senses sharper than any human has ever possessed, and immortality." As he spoke, the other pack members began to change. Their shapes flowed like water, shifting between human and wolf forms. I watched in horrified fascination as their faces elongated into full wolf muzzles, then shortened back to the hybrid form, then became almost completely human, except for the eyes, which remained wolf-yellow and predatory. "You can control the change," the leader explained, demonstrating his form flowed from the wolfman hybrid to what looked like a perfectly normal human male in his 30s. "We can walk among humans undetected, learning their weaknesses, choosing our prey." "Prey," I whispered. "The families with children," he said, smiling with too many teeth. "The ones who venture into our territory, thinking they are safe. The weak ones who do not understand that these mountains belong to us." I realized with growing horror what he was describing. They weren't just monsters, they were intelligent predators who had been hunting humans for sport. The families at the campground hadn't been random victims. They'd been selected, studied, hunted like animals. "You're talking about murder," I said. "We are talking about the natural order," he replied. "The strong consume the weak. We offer you the chance to be strong." Through my earpiece, I heard Sheriff Morrison's voice. "Rebecca, we've got movement all around the rock. More of them than we planned for. Get out of there now." The leader's ears perked up, and he tilted his head like a dog hearing a distant sound. "Your pack has come to rescue you," he said, sounding amused. "How touching." That's when I saw them. Dozens of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness below us, surrounding the entire base of Looking Glass Rock. My backup team had walked into a trap. "You see," the leader said, "we have been growing our pack for many years. Not all of our recruits were willing at first, but they learned to appreciate the gift we gave them." Gunshots echoed from below us, followed by screams, human screams, of terror, mixing with howls that sounded like celebration. "Choose now, Rebecca Thornton," the leader said. "Join us willingly and help us spare your pack, or refuse, and watch them all die before you follow them." I looked at the 6 creatures surrounding me, then at the chaos erupting below. My hand moved to my service weapon, but I knew bullets wouldn't be enough. Not against this many of them. That's when I remembered the emergency flare in my belt. I'd noticed something during their transformation display. When they shifted shapes, they closed their eyes for just a moment, like the change required complete concentration. If I was going to make a move, that moment of vulnerability was my only chance. "I need to understand what you're offering," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Show me the full transformation again. I want to see exactly what I'd become." The leader smiled, pleased that I seemed to be considering his offer. "Of course, watch closely." He nodded to the pack, and all 6 of them began to change simultaneously. Their forms flowed and shifted, bones stretching and reforming with sounds like cracking branches. For about 3 seconds, their eyes were closed in concentration. I yanked the flare gun from my belt and fired directly at the leader. The bright red flare hit him in the chest and exploded in a shower of burning phosphorus. His scream was unlike anything I'd ever heard, part human agony, part animal howl. The light was blindingly bright on the white granite, and the other pack members recoiled like they'd been hit with acid. The leader stumbled backward, clawing at the burning chemicals stuck to his fur. Where the phosphorus touched him, his skin was sizzling and smoking. The smell of burning hair and flesh filled the air. "Light!" I shouted into my radio. "They're afraid of bright light. Use flares, use everything." But the celebration was short-lived. Even as the leader writhed in pain, the other 5 were recovering from their shock, and they were angry. One of them lunged at me with speed that shouldn't have been possible. I dove to the side, and his claws scraped across the granite where I'd been standing, leaving deep gouges in the solid rock. I fired my service weapon 3 times, center mass. The bullets hit him. I saw the impacts, but he barely staggered. Dark blood splattered the granite, but he kept coming. That's when I realized the truth. They could be hurt, but not killed, easily. The flare had done real damage because of the light and fire, but conventional weapons were just an annoyance to them. The pack was closing in from all sides. Below us, the gunfire was getting sporadic, replaced by more screams and howls. My backup team was losing. I backed toward the edge of the summit, mind racing. Looking Glass Rock has a nearly vertical drop on 3 sides, about 200 feet straight down to the forest below. Rock climbers used ropes and specialized equipment to make that descent safely. I had my emergency rappelling gear in my pack, but I'd never attempted a descent in the dark, under fire, while being chased by monsters. The wounded leader was still on fire, but getting back to his feet. "You will pay for that, human," he snarled. "We will make your death last days." "I don't think so," I said, and stepped backward off the cliff. For a moment, I was in free fall, and I thought I'd made a fatal mistake. Then my rappelling gear caught. The rope snapped, taut, and I slammed into the rock face hard enough to knock the wind out of me. Above me, the pack members howled in frustration. I heard the leader roar, "Find another way down. She will not escape." I rappelled as fast as I dared in the darkness, using my flashlight to avoid the worst of the rock outcropping. Halfway down, I heard them above me. They were following, somehow climbing down the sheer rock face with their claws. My feet hit the ground, and I immediately started running toward where I'd left my truck. Behind me, I could hear them hitting the forest floor and giving chase. They were faster than me, much faster. I could hear them crashing through the underbrush, getting closer with every step. My only advantage was that I knew these woods better than anyone. I reached my truck just as the first of them burst from the tree line behind me. I gunned the engine and floored it down the mountain road, headlights cutting through the darkness. In my rear-view mirror, I could see them following, not running alongside the road, but actually chasing the truck on all fours at nearly 40 miles per hour. Their eyes reflected red in my taillights like demons. I radioed for help as I drove, but all I got back was static. Either my radio was damaged, or there was no one left to answer. It wasn't until I reached the main highway that they finally stopped following. I looked back to see 6 pairs of glowing eyes watching from the forest edge as I drove away. I didn't stop driving until I reached the state police barracks in Asheville, 50 miles away. The official report stated that a pack of rabid wolves had attacked the Blue Ridge campground and later killed Ranger Billy Matthews and 6 law enforcement officers. During a night patrol operation, the wolves were eliminated by a coordinated hunting effort, and the area was temporarily closed to prevent further incidents. I was commended for my bravery and offered a promotion to district supervisor. Instead, I requested an immediate transfer to a desk job in Charlotte, citing stress-related issues and a need to be closer to medical facilities. What I didn't tell them was that I couldn't sleep anymore. Every night, I heard howling in the distance, coordinated howling that seemed to come from different parts of the state each time, like they were moving, spreading out, claiming new territory. I developed a severe fear of dogs. Even seeing a German Shepherd on the street would send me into a panic attack. My doctor prescribed medication and recommended therapy, but how do you explain to a therapist that you've seen werewolves? 3 months after the incident, I started getting reports from other ranger stations. Campers going missing near Grandfather Mountain, strange tracks found around Lake Norman, families reporting wolfmen near the Awari National Forest. Each report was dismissed, filed away, forgotten, but I knew better. The pack was growing, spreading throughout North Carolina. They were recruiting new members, just like their leader had promised. I tried to warn people, but who would believe? Me, a female ranger who'd cracked under pressure and requested a desk job. My credibility was shot. 6 months later, I received a package at my apartment in Charlotte. No return address, just a small box with my name written in what looked like claw marks on the cardboard. Inside was a photograph of me leaving my apartment building that morning. On the back, someone had written in neat handwriting, "The offer remains open. We are patient. We are growing." That night, I heard howling outside my apartment window. When I looked out, I saw a man standing under the streetlight across the street. He looked perfectly normal, average height, normal clothes, nothing threatening about him, but his eyes reflected the light like an animal's. He smiled, waved at me like a friendly neighbor, and walked away into the darkness. I put in for a transfer to Oregon the next morning, then Arizona, then Alaska. It didn't matter. Every few months, I'd get another photograph, another message. They were always watching, always waiting. I'm 53 now, 20 years after. That night, on Looking Glass Rock, I work as a file clerk for the Forest Service in Anchorage, as far from those North Carolina mountains as I could get. But sometimes, when the moon is full and the aurora is dancing across the sky, I hear them calling to me, howling my name across the wilderness, reminding me that some invitations can never be truly refused. They're still out there, still growing, still hunting, and they're still waiting for me to come home.